Welcome to Priestess Initiations, the Goddess Coven. I'm Casey Dunn, educator, priestess, and professional somatic therapist. In April 2025, I went through a priestess initiation of old and launched the Priestess Initiations podcast 6 months later. Whatever brought you here today, I invite you to drop into the spiral with me. Let's begin. Welcome back to Priestess Initiations. I'm Casey, this is episode 11, and today we're talking about creative practice as priestess work. That intro music you just heard, you might have noticed, is new. My dad composed it for the podcast. He's been a musician his whole life, playing guitar, bass, and piano as a hobby. And now in retirement, he's finally circling back to music as a second career. And in this episode about creative practice as priestess work, it felt like the right time to debut his contribution. So I'll set up a poll in the comments, and I'd love to hear what you think about the music and whether or not it enhances the experience for you. So if you've been listening this season, you've heard me talk about the goddesses, about initiation, about the body. But what I haven't fully explored is this. Creativity itself is a form of spiritual practice. Art making is ritual. Creation is how we make soul visible. And when I say creativity, I don't just mean painting or writing, though those are part of it for me. I mean any act of bringing something into being that wasn't there before. Whether that's visual art, poetry, dance, cooking, gardening, building, singing, whatever your creative expression is. My partner's current creative expression is those little Warhammer figurines. Some of you might know what they are. But here's what I've learned. Creativity is one of the best ways we have of processing grief, of processing trauma, of putting complex emotions and sensations into the physical plane of existence. And creativity can be a spiritual channel. When you create, you're not just making something, you're channeling something. You're allowing energy to move through you from the unseen realm into form. That's priestess work, and that's what we're exploring today. Before we dive in, I want to share the astrology transit of the week, something I'll be doing in episodes going forward. And I'm just picking what I think is the most important or relevant transit of the week. So this week, on Wednesday, today, if you're listening, when this episode releases, January 8th at 7:43 p.m. Mountain Time, we have Venus conjunct Mars in Capricorn. And Venus is the lover, beauty, values. Venus is a Roman goddess who is a form of the Greek goddess Aphrodite, some might say. And then Mars is the warrior, desire, action, and the will to make it happen. And they're meeting in Capricorn, the builder, the one who gives form to vision. So what does this mean? Your creative desire and your ability to act on it are perfectly aligned, which is actually why I moved this episode up. So the episode that you're getting next week was supposed to be this week until I looked at the astrology transits and I said, nope, this is the week. Because what you love, you have the energy to build. What calls to you aesthetically, you have the willpower to manifest. And this is one of the most potent transits for creative practice because it's not just inspiration. It's inspiration plus action. Venus says, I love this. I value this. I want to make beauty. And Mars says, okay, let's do it. Now. And in Capricorn, that means giving your creativity structure. Not just dreaming about the art you want to make, but actually sitting down and making it. Building your creative practice into something sustainable, something real. That's what this episode is about. Creative practice as priestess work. Not just when inspiration strikes, but as a committed, embodied practice. And if you want to know more about the astrology transits, I will be posting on our Patreon for all Coven member tiers, weekly updates on the most potent astrology transits of the week. And those will come out every Monday at 11:11 a.m. All right, let's get into it. So I want to tell you about my relationship with creativity because it's been lifelong. I've been creating my whole life. I was a very artistic child. One of my gifts is spatial awareness. I can see in 3 dimensions. I can understand how things fit together in space. And I have a deep love and reverence for color, for the emotions that color can evoke. And that might be why when I work somatically, there's often a lot of visual representation. When I picture my body, I picture so many different color fields in it. Red in my root, orange in my sacral, yellow in my solar plexus, yes, but also more complex colors. The deep purple black of grief in my belly. The electric blue of my voice when it's activated with tinges of green like little sparkles in it. And the golden light that fills my heart when Isis is present. Color is a language for me, and art has always been the way I speak that language. Over the years, I've experimented with watercolor, oil paints, acrylic. I've taken classes at art schools. I almost ended up with a degree in art. I was in an art and environmental studies double major for 3 years before I changed paths. I've worked with wire, metal, and clay sculpture. I've done casting. And after I moved to Boulder, I, of course, did that little bit of graphic design, and I took some more pottery classes. And when I was a kid, I went to this wonderful art camp in Bethel, Maine, where I did stained glass, jewelry making, pottery, and photography. So when I say I'm an artist and I've experimented with it, I mean it. This isn't a casual hobby. It's a core part of who I am. And creativity runs in my family. My dad, the musician who composed the intro you heard, has been playing instruments his whole life. And music was always part of our household growing up. My mom plays a really good Beethoven on the piano as well. And then now, as my dad is stepping more fully into that creative identity in retirement, I get to witness what it looks like when someone says, "This thing I've loved my whole life, I'm claiming it as my work now." And even farther back, my grandmother, his mother, was a visual artist and a piano teacher. And her parents were artists and musicians traveling all over Ireland. That's powerful intergenerational artistry. And claiming that history is part of what creative practice as priestess work can look like. Honoring what's been there all along and finally giving it full expression. But I'm not just a visual artist. I also work with words, with stories, with poems. And I think that's equally important. And then I've been a dancer my whole life to some extent. I did classical modern dance for about 10 years before taking a hiatus in college and then discovering ecstatic dance here in Boulder. So my creativity moves across mediums. Sometimes it's paint. My dog always wants to shake and make a nest when I'm recording. I'm sorry about that. But sometimes it's paint, sometimes it's clay, sometimes it's words. And then sometimes it's my body moving through space. And here's what I've learned. What it means to be creative varies from person to person. And the modality of your creativity doesn't matter. What matters is that you're creating something. You don't have to be a trained artist. You don't have to be good at it. You just have to let something move through you and take form. That's creativity. That's art. That's the work. So why does creativity matter for spiritual work? And why am I talking about it on a podcast about psychology and goddess initiation? Because creativity is one of the most powerful tools we have for alchemizing what's inside us. When you're in grief, when you're in trauma, when you're holding complex emotions that you don't have words for, creativity gives you a way to externalize it, to get it out of your body and into form. And this is especially true for those of us who are somatic practitioners, who work with the body. Because sometimes the body knows things the mind doesn't. The body holds things language can't reach. But creativity can reach it. Paint can reach it. Clay can reach it. Movement can reach it. Poetry can reach it. I've painted my grief. I've danced my rage. I've written poems about initiations I didn't have words for in regular conversation. And when I create from that place, from the raw, unprocessed emotion, something shifts. The emotion doesn't go away, but it transforms. It moves through me and into the art. And in doing so, it becomes something else, something I can witness and hold outside my body. That's alchemy. That's what the goddesses teach us. Isis takes the scattered pieces of Osiris and reassembles them into something new. Kali destroys what's false so something truer can emerge. Persephone descends into grief and emerges as the queen of the dead. And creativity is how we do that work. We take what's inside, the grief, the rage, the confusion, the beauty, the terror, and we alchemize it into form. Paint, clay, words, song, dance, whatever medium calls to you. And once it's in a form, once it's outside of you, you can relate to it differently. You can witness it. You can honor it. You can decide if you want to keep it, transform it, or let it go. That's the magic of creative practice. It's not just self-expression. It's soul work. It's making the invisible visible. It's taking the inner world and bringing it to the outer world so you can see what you've been carrying. And so there's a deeper layer to creativity that I want to talk about, and that's creativity as spiritual channel. When you create, you're not always creating from your everyday conscious self. Sometimes you're channeling something deeper, a part of you that doesn't usually get to speak, a goddess energy, an ancestor, your higher self, your inner child. And I've learned that I can intentionally invite different parts of myself to create through me. And what comes out is always surprising, always revealing. Last year, I had a day where I let my teenage part paint whatever she wanted. I set up my paints and I said, okay, you're in charge today. Paint whatever you want, dress however you want. And she came through. Loud, wild, unfiltered. She painted in black, purple, pink, and blood red with gold accents from this tissue paper I'd forgotten I even had in the back of my closet. Dark colors, but vibrant. The colors of a bruise, the colors of a wound that's also beautiful. And the gold was her defiance, her power glinting through the darkness. And of course, she dressed like a witch, full Halloween level witch, but barefoot, wild, messy hair. She didn't care if she looked put together or appropriate. She wanted to embody her wildness, her witchiness, her refusal to be tamed. And I made a playlist. I let her have a playlist. It was basically all Evanescence, Shinedown, and Taylor Swift, because that's what I listened to as a teenager. And something funny happened. My teenage part became really good friends with my Lilith part. My inner teenager and my Lilith energy, they've been paired ever since. Because they both have that untamed, unapologetic, I don't care what you think of me energy. They both refuse domestication. This is kind of very similar to what Carl Jung called active imagination, giving different parts of your psyche a way to express themselves, often through creative practice. So it's not just art, it's depth psychology as spiritual work. And I wouldn't have discovered that if I hadn't given my teenage self permission to create. So this is what I mean by creativity as channel. You can invite specific energies, specific parts of yourself, specific goddesses to move through you and create. Want to know what your inner child needs to express? Give her crayons and paper and see what happens. If you want to understand your Kali energy better, put on music that feels like destruction. I have a really great Dark Goddess Rage playlist. I might put that in the comments. Actually, no, I'll put that one on Patreon, and in the comments, I'm going to put a link to my dad's music. He's also on Spotify, so you can check him out. He does kind of Beatles-esque vibes. One of my favorite songs is called Hey Na Na, and it's a little more Jimmy Buffett-esque. I don't know. I just like that one. It's fun to dance around to. But the point is, like, you can connect with anyone. If you want to connect with Isis, work with your hands. Clay, bread making. Anything tactile that involves gathering and shaping. Collecting flower petals, making potpourri. Even collage. The creative process reveals what's underneath, right? It bypasses the thinking mind and goes straight to the soul or psyche. And when you create from that place, you're not just making art. You're doing spiritual work. You're letting the unseen become seen. And so I want to talk about something else that often gets left out of conversations about creativity, but it's essential. And that's that creativity is sexual life force. In tantric traditions, this is called Shakti, the divine feminine creative energy that moves through all of creation. It's the kundalini rising. It's the energy that births worlds, that generates life, that brings form into being. And Shakti is inherently sexual. And I don't mean sexual in the sense of like sex acts, but sexual in the sense of this is life force energy. This is generative power. This is the erotic as the creative. So when I create, sexuality is part of it. My creative energy and my sexual energy are the same energy. They both live in the sacral chakra, and they both move through the body as aliveness, as pleasure, as power. And so this is a place where Medusa can come in. If you remember the Medusa episode, we talked about sexual trauma, about boundaries, about reclaiming power. But we didn't talk about this part. When you reclaim your creative power, you're also reclaiming your sexual power. They're interconnected. And for many of us, especially those of us with sexual trauma, there's shame entwined with our creative expression. Because creativity and sexuality both involve being seen, being vulnerable, and revealing something intimate about yourself. So when you put your art into the world, you're exposing something that came from deep inside you. And if you've been taught that what's inside you is shameful, dangerous, or too much, then showing your art feels like showing your body. It feels vulnerable in the same way sexual vulnerability does. I've felt this when I publish a poem, when I post a painting, when I share something I've created. Even on this podcast, right? There's a part of me that feels exposed, that wonders, will they judge me? Will they see me differently? Will they think I'm too much, too intense, too dark? And that fear is Medusa's wound. It's the internalized shame that says if you show your power, if you reveal your sexuality, if you express your fullness, you'll be punished. You'll be turned into a monster. But Medusa teaches us that power, that sexuality, that fullness, it's not monstrous. It's sacred. It's your life force. It's Shakti moving through you. And when you create from that place, from the deep, sexual, generative power of your being, you're not being inappropriate or shameful. You're being alive. You're channeling the divine feminine creative force. And this doesn't mean your art has to be explicitly sexual. It means don't cut off your creative power from your life force. Don't sanitize your art to make it acceptable. Let it be as wild, as sensual, as alive as it wants to be. And if people judge you for that, that's their Medusa wound. That's their discomfort with feminine power, with sexuality, with aliveness. Not your problem. Your job is to create from the fullness of who you are. Sacred, creative, powerful, all of it. And so as I'm talking about the vulnerability of putting work out there, I also need to address something called the artist wound. And I might be coining that term. I might not. But to me, it's this tension between creativity as spiritual practice and creativity under capitalism. And so I'm a self-published poet and fantasy author. I have books out in the world, but I don't spend a lot of time or energy or money promoting my work. And I've had to make peace with that because for me, the promotion, the monetizing of art and creativity takes away the creative flow. It also removes some of the vulnerability. And if you've been listening to this podcast by now, you know that I'm really playing with this vulnerability edge because it's important for you to see it modeled. And here's what I've learned. It's important to dismantle our notions under capitalism and patriarchy that vulnerability is only good when it makes money. I'm going to say that again. We need to dismantle our notions under capitalism and patriarchy that vulnerability is only good when it makes money. Because capitalism tells us your art is only valuable if you can sell it, if you can build a brand around it, if you can monetize it. But that's a lie. Your art is valuable because it exists, because you made it, because it holds your soul, your grief, your joy, your alchemized emotions. Whether anyone buys it or not, it mattered. It did its work. And now that's not to say that artists shouldn't be adequately compensated for their work. Artists more than anyone deserve compensation, and next on that list is healers. And I realize that I'm both an artist and a healer saying we deserve more compensation, but I see it in so many of my friends and loved ones, and it's true. Because when you think about a world without art, without healers, without creation, it becomes very sterile. It becomes a world that's all masculine, all technology, all science, and no flow. Creativity is the bridge. Creativity bridges heaven and earth, the underworld and earth. Creativity's feminine. Healing is feminine. Traditionally, but that doesn't mean that only women can do it. It just exists in those feminine energetic fields. The receptive, the generative, the flowing, the bringing into form. And patriarchy doesn't value that. Capitalism doesn't value that unless it can extract profit from it. So we, as artists and healers, have to hold this tension. Our work is sacred, and we deserve to be compensated. Our creativity is spiritual practice, and we live in a material world where we need money. I hold this tension by creating freely, painting when I'm called to paint, writing when I'm called to write, and not forcing myself to market or monetize every creative act. But I also put my work out into the world. I self-publish, I share, I trust that what I create will reach the people it's meant to reach. And if someone wants to buy my poetry book, beautiful. If they just find a poem I posted online and it helps them, also beautiful. Because the work is the work, the creation is the prayer, and the rest is extra. But I also just want to be clear here that if you are an artist who wants to make a living from your art, there's no shame in that. Monetizing your creativity doesn't make it less sacred. It just means you've found a way to be compensated for your priestess work. I think the key is not to let the monetization dictate the creation. Don't let capitalism tell you what's valuable. Create what's true. Create what wants to come through, and then figure out if or how to sell or share it. But first, create from soul, not strategy. So there's a new fear that comes in when you actually put your work out into the world. Because it's one thing to create in private, and it's another thing entirely to show people what you've made. And that fear of being seen, of being judged, being misunderstood, being rejected, that fear is real. And it's big. When I publish my poetry, a new podcast episode, when I share my work, I'm afraid every time. I'm afraid of what people will think, especially people who know me. Family, friends, people from my past who knew me when I was different, when I was smaller, when I was hiding. What will they think when they read my poems about rage, about sexuality, about the fall, about the goddesses? What will they see me claiming? What will they think when they see me claiming myself as a priestess, as a witch, as someone who channels dark goddesses and writes about blood and transformation? Not that I write that much about blood, but I do think it's important that we work with menstrual cycles. But the idea is, will they judge me? Will they think I've lost my way? Will they be uncomfortable? Probably. Will they distance themselves from me? I hope not. And those are real fears, and I don't think they ever fully go away. But I've learned that the fear of being seen is actually the fear of being rejected for who you really are. When you create something true, when you make art from your actual depths, you're revealing yourself. You're saying, this is what's inside me. This is how I see the world. This is my truth. And there's great vulnerability in that. Because what if people don't like your truth? What if they judge it, dismiss it, mock it? But here's the other side. When you don't put your work out there, when you hide it because you're afraid, you're rejecting yourself before anyone else can. You're saying, my truth isn't worth sharing, my voice isn't worth hearing, and my art isn't valuable unless everyone approves of it. And to me, that's the bigger tragedy. I'd rather be seen and judged than invisible and safe. I'd rather put my work out there and have some people not like it than keep it hidden and never know who it might have reached. Because here's what I've also learned. The people who are meant to receive your work will find it. And they will be changed by it. And they will thank you for your courage in sharing it. And the people who judge you, they're not your people. They're not the ones your work is for. I've had family members be uncomfortable with my work. I've had people from my past not understand what I'm doing now. And that's okay. They don't have to understand. My work isn't for them. My work is for the people who are ready for it, the people who need it, the people who recognize themselves in my words, my art, my vulnerability. And those people, they make the risk worth it. And then I want to say this too, about being too much, because I think we often get this wrong. People will tell you directly or indirectly that you're too much, too intense, too emotional, too sexual, too witchy, too dark, too loud, too wild, right? And the common response in spiritual circles is, you're too much for some people, and that's perfect. Those aren't your people. And while there's truth in that, a lot of truth, I don't think it's the whole picture. Because here's what I've come to understand. When you're too much for someone, it's not actually that you are too much. You're illuminating their fear of being too much. You're reflecting their inability and lack of capacity to be with truth and fullness. And I didn't quite realize this until I found people who could be with my fullness, who never ask me to tone it down. Or when they do ask me to adjust, it's not because I'm wrong or too much. It's because energetically, they're in a different place that day. They're communicating their capacity, not judging my intensity. And that's a huge difference. Yeah. And I think part of my goal in this podcast is to hold this nuance, to not speak in black and white terms in places where I see there's so much more, and there's always more, right? But this is an important one because something really healing happened with my partner around this idea of too muchness, right? When I'm having big grief or big sadness, which I do often right now with the state of our world, right? His instinct, which is very masculine protector energy, comes up to fix it, to make it better, to solve the problem. And I've learned to say, I don't need fixing. I just need you to be with me. And sometimes he struggles with that because being with someone's big emotions without fixing them requires capacity. It requires being able to sit in discomfort, to not rush to resolve, to just hold space. And when he's struggling, he owns that. He doesn't tell me I'm too much. He says, I'm working on expanding my capacity to be with you without needing to fix. That's the difference. I'm not too much. He's building capacity. And he knows that. And he's willing to do that work because he sees my fullness as sacred, not as a problem. Now, I need to be clear that embracing your fullness, having big emotions, being too much, that's not an excuse to lash out at others. We still don't get to lash out. We still have to take responsibility for how we express our intensity. But there's a difference between lashing out and simply being in your fullness. Lashing out is attacking someone because you're in pain. Being in your fullness is expressing your grief, your rage, your joy, your sexuality, your power, and asking the people around you to witness it, to be with it, not to fix it or shrink it or absorb it. And if someone can't witness your fullness, that's information. That's not about you being too much. That's about their capacity. And they get to work on expanding that capacity, or they get to choose not to be in close relationship with you. But you don't have to shrink. You don't have to tone it down, and you don't have to be less. You get to be full, and you get to find people, your coven, your partner, your friends, who can be with that fullness, who see it as sacred, who might sometimes say, hey, today I don't have capacity for big intensity. And you can honor that without making it mean you're wrong. That's mature relationship. And that's what happens when you stop believing the lie that you're too much and start understanding I'm full and I'm learning to be with people who can hold that. Okay, so I want to tie this back to the goddess work we've been doing all season because creativity is deeply connected to the cycles we've been exploring. I'm creating this podcast in fall and winter. Right now it's winter in the dark season. And that's not an accident. Fall and winter are my creative seasons. They're when I write, they're when I paint, they're when I let the creative energy flow through me from unseen into form. Because fall is when Persephone descends, when the leaves fall and the earth opens and we go down into the underworld. And winter is when she rules. Queen of the dead, sovereign in the darkness. And that's when I create. In the descent, in the darkness, in the quiet, cold months when the world is asleep and I can hear the goddesses more clearly. And I give myself a little bit more space in my life to do so. But the goddesses who rule fall and winter, Persephone, Hecate, a little bit of Kali, they're all deeply creative in their own ways, right? Persephone is queen of the dead, but she's also the one who holds the seeds that will bloom in spring. She's gestation. She's potential waiting to emerge. Hecate holds the keys, the torch, the crossroads. She's the dark mother, who essentially, I want to use the word midwife, who midwifes what wants to be born, right? Like she's the teacher, the guide, but she's the midwife of whatever is being born. That's Hecate. And Kali destroys, but she also creates. She clears space so something new can emerge, kind of like a wildfire. And these are the goddesses of the creative underworld, the ones who teach us that creation isn't always bright and shiny. Sometimes it's dark, sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's destructive first, but it's always transformation. It's always bringing something new into being. And that's what I do in fall and winter. I descend, I create, I give myself spaciousness as much as I can in our world, and I let the dark goddesses move through me and make things. This podcast is being created in the dark season because it's underworld work. This is Persephone and Hecate and Isis and Lilith all channeling through me. Medusa, helping me shape the teachings into form. Your creativity might have a different season. Maybe you create in spring or summer. And I create different things then. But this dark goddess work really calls to me in the dark season. And what matters is not the particular season, but that you honor your creative rhythm, that you give yourself permission to create when you're called to create and to rest when you need to rest. Because creativity isn't constant, it's cyclical. Just like the goddesses, just like the seasons, just like your own body. And if you are in a male body, you also have seasons. They just operate on a 24-hour cycle. Okay, well, let's close with a creative practice, an invitation to let something move through you. You don't need any supplies for this, though if you have art supplies nearby, you can use them. Just hit pause and go ahead and grab some. But this practice works with just your body and your imagination too. So close your eyes if you're not driving, and let's take a breath. One more. Now ask yourself, what wants to be created through me right now? Don't think about it too hard. Just notice what arises. Maybe it's a color or a sound. Maybe there's a movement, a gesture, a word, or a phrase. Maybe it's an image or a feeling. Whatever comes, just receive it. Don't judge it. Don't analyze it. Just let it be. And now, if you have a way to express it, do that. If you have pen or paper, you can draw the color or write the word. If you're alone, you can make the sound or do the movement. And if you don't have anything, just hold it in your imagination and feel it. Picture yourself creating it. This is creation. This is the act of letting the unseen become seen, even if only you see it. Let's take one more breath. And now just taking a moment to thank whatever came through. Thank the part of you that wanted to create this little micro creation. Thank the goddess, the muse, the Shakti, the creative life force that moved through you. You don't have to do anything with what you created. You don't have to share it or finish it or make it good. You just had to let it move through you. That's the practice. That's priestess work. That's creativity as spiritual channel. Everything we explore here lives in practice, and the link is in our bio for our free website resources where you'll find our ritual grimoire, embodiment library, and online workshops diving deeper into the work. If this work is serving you and you want to support the podcast, I have a Patreon where you get monthly new moon rituals, the ability to list your business in our Coven shop, and more, including those new weekly astrology transit posts. That link is also in the episode bio. And your support helps me keep creating this content and building the Coven. And right now, the Coven is in a stage where we're looking for founding members, which is really cool because that means you get to shape what this becomes, right? And if you're curious about my creative work, my poetry, my writing, my visual art, you can find links to that in the episode description as well. I'll post the link to my Amazon profile. Unfortunately, that's where my writing is right now. But unpublished poetry drops on Patreon whenever the muse strikes. And then I also have watercolor prints available for purchase on Patreon. And full moon initiates receive free print downloads of those watercolors as part of their tier benefits. So I trust that if my work is meant to reach you, it will. And I will also be posting the link in this episode description, not subscription, in this episode description to my dad's Spotify. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Trust the spiral. This podcast offers spiritual and psychological education and priestess wisdom. This is not therapy, counseling, or mental health treatment. If you need mental health support, please contact a licensed provider. In a mental health emergency in the U.S., call 988.